Ready, Rick Manning here. Big news out of the House of Representatives yesterday, where Adam Schiff, the leading mouthpiece for the Russia collusion hoax, was censured by the House of Representatives for his lies and abuse of power. Let's go directly to a little clip from Anna Paulina Luna, new freshman representative, who made it her business to make Adam Schiff pay a price for the lies he subjected this country to. Here's Luna from yesterday talking about the lies that Schiff told.
Mr. Schiff exploited his position as chair of Intel Committee and every opportunity possible, threatening national security, undermining our duly elected president, and bringing dishonor upon the institution. Perhaps most unforgivable, Schiff ripped apart American families across the country with repeated false narratives. His own political good was served by permanently destroying family relationships and sowing lasting division across our land, which we live with every single day. The perpetrator of this web of deceit became mainstays on cable news, waking up every morning with one goal: to lie to the American people that there was a direct evidence of Russia collusion. Despite transcripts from Schiff's investigation showing that the Director of National Intelligence, former Obama Attorney General, former Attorney General, and FBI Director, to name a few, went on record telling Schiff's committee that there was no direct evidence for his criminal conspiracy. Yet to this day, Schiff actively fundraises off of his exploitation of Americans as if robbing them from the truth and $32 million in taxpayer dollars was not enough. Can anyone in this chamber comprehend this list of crimes and yet somehow believe that there should not be an answer for it? This is not a partisan act. This is not a conservative versus liberal vote. This is a clear vote between right and wrong, and I urge you to do the right thing. I will end with repeating with what I started with. The American people do not trust Congress. The cyclical pattern of lies has worn down the credibility of every institution and every official in the United States government. You see it, I see it. If we run away from this opportunity to hold this man accountable, there's only one fault, and that is of ourselves.
And there you have it. Representative Luna put a lot on the line to stand up and say, no, we're not going to actually allow Adam Schiff to continue running a bed of lies, and the House is going to hold somebody accountable. We always complain that nobody ever gets held accountable. Well, yesterday, due to the actions of Representative Luna from Florida, a freshman, Adam Schiff was held accountable in a way that the House has available to them, which is to censure him. It's a big deal. It's a big deal here in Washington, D.C. But let's just go back and just remind ourselves of why he got censured. This is Adam Schiff talking to CNN about the Russia collusion. And as you'll hear, he basically lays out a string of so-called facts, which turned out not to be facts at all.
I want to start with this new report about Russian efforts to contact Hope Hicks. What do you make of this continued effort to permeate President Trump's inner circle?
Well, without getting the specifics of that allegation, we do know that the Russians throughout the campaign were making outreach to the campaign. They continue that during the transition, including some of the people they had talked to during the campaign, and obviously even after that point. So this is part of a concerted Russian influence operation that never stopped. We've also seen a lot of what we saw during the campaign in terms of Russian social media intervention never stop. The only issue I took when James Comey testified that the Russians will be back is they've never left in terms of certain parts of their active measures campaign, but it's not at all a surprise that they would make outreach to people they thought would have influence in the administration and misrepresent who they were and what their agenda was.
Does this report at all undermine the idea that the Russians had already established close contacts within the Trump inner circle? I mean, if they already had done that, why bother reaching out to Hope Hicks?
Well, the Russian tradecraft is to try to find as many entrees as they can to make influence over foreign governments. So even though they had good contacts within the administration, and probably none better than Mike Flynn, they were seeking other avenues, other ways to exert influence. And I think we've seen that as part of a broad pattern, some which I can't get into here today, but that is very much consistent with Russian tradecraft.
So you said earlier this week about the Russia investigation, quote, you really have to be trying to look away to say there's no evidence of collusion here. Now, as far as the public knows, we've seen evidence of Russian hacking, according to the intelligence community. We've seen the Russians dangling these emails, these damaging emails, before contacts with the Trump team or members of the Trump team. And we've seen members of the Trump team expressing willingness to get dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russians, but we haven't seen the actual connection. We haven't seen an actual proof of cooperation and collusion. So what am I missing here?
Well, I think you have to look at the pattern and the chronology. You have in late April, the Russians approaching the Trump campaign and saying, we have stolen Hillary Clinton emails. You have only weeks later, the Russians making another approach to the campaign, this time at the highest levels, offering dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
The campaign already on notice that they have emails. You then have the message going back from the campaign to the Russians, basically, we would love to have your help. We'd love to play ball, but we are really disappointed in what you gave us. And only days later, Julian Assange announces he's received stolen emails, which we know now came from the Russians. And the Russians themselves start publishing the emails through these cutouts. You then have Trump Jr. in private secret communication with WikiLeaks. So we have all of these facts in chronology. You'd have to believe that these were all isolated incidents, not connected to each other. Just doesn't make rational sense. Now, can you prove beyond a reasonable doubt, will be Mueller's question to answer, that the Russians communicated to the campaign that the way they were going to deliver the help they offered and that the campaign accepted was not by handing the emails directly over to the campaign, but by publishing them? That will be up to Mueller, and we continue to try to fill in all of the missing pieces. But we do know this. The Russians offered help. The campaign accepted help. The Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help. And that is pretty damning, whether it is proof beyond a reasonable doubt of conspiracy.
Okay, so there you go. That's Schiff early on in the Trump administration, pushing the Russia collusion lie. But, he said, Mueller will be we'll see what Mueller can do. And so perhaps you'd be interested in seeing what Mueller did do. We've pulled up the Mueller report. And I'm going to go just to an article that we wrote that quotes from it. And what you'll see is that Mueller writes, according to his final report, the evidence was not sufficient to charge that any member of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with representatives of the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 election. So the answer to Schiff was no. No, there wasn't sufficient evidence to connect those dots. You connected those dots because they were political dots that were created by the Hillary Clinton campaign, but no sufficient evidence to move forward. You didn't have, what you were talking about as fact couldn't be proven. And yet you used, Mr. Schiff, you used your position as a ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee and later as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee to attempt to continue the lie, even when all reasonable people who knew what was going on said, no, that's not true. The report also added, this is the Mueller report again, in particular, the office did not find evidence likely to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that campaign officials such as Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, and Carter Page acted as agents of the Russian government or at its direction, control, or request during the relevant time period. So no, those people you keep mentioning, you smeared them publicly as being Russian agents, using your position as a member of the House of Representatives and hiding behind the cloak of, I can't tell you how I know. Trust me, but you got to trust me on this. I'm a ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, or I'm the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. I've got a briefcase. It's empty, but trust me, it's full of stuff. And you ruined people's lives, dragging them through the mud, ruined their lives. Being censored is a very, very light penalty to pay for Schiff, but we should all be happy that he paid it. Now let's just look at what Durham had to say, just for grins and giggles, because as we know, Durham was asked yesterday by I'm going to go to Representative Rusty Johnson Tim Johnson from Louisiana, and he asked Durham a very specific question. pay attention to this.
You wrote in your report, quote, based on the evidence gathered in the multiple exhaustive and costly federal investigations of these matters, including the instant investigation, neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire investigation. To date, has any evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia ever been uncovered?
I mean, there is information, obviously, in the report that was prepared by Director Mueller and whatnot. But as to collusion or conspiracy, I'm not aware of any.
And let me stop you. When the FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane, that's the issue at hand, it did not have any information that anyone in the Trump campaign had ever been in contact with Russian intelligence officials. Isn't that right?
As we wrote in the report, we talked to the director of the CIA, the deputy director of the CIA, the director of NSA, and people within the FBI, and there was no such information that they had in their holdings at the time they opened Crossfire Hurricane.
And you detail, I'm going to go quickly here, I run out of time. You detail how FBI personnel working on FISA applications violated protocols. They were cavalier at best, as you said in your own words, towards accuracy and completeness. Senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor towards information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons or entities. And you said, quote, a significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded by Trump's political opponents were relied upon here. Among the most alarming things that you referred to in the report is the impact of confirmation bias. And you said in your report at page 303, that's defined as, or it stands for, the general proposition that there is a common human tendency, mostly unintentional, for people to accept information and evidence that is consistent with what they believe to be true. But sir, here, this wasn't innocent, unintentional human tendency, was it? It was overt political bias, was it not? Peter Strzok, for example.
There are some individuals who clearly expressed a personal bias. It's difficult to get into somebody else's head to see whether they knew it.
Unless we have their emails, right? And Peter Strzok, for example, he had pronounced hostile feelings towards President Trump. Everybody knows that. Everybody in the country knows it. So he was in charge of this. He was the Deputy Assistant Director of Counterintelligence, officially opened the investigation at the direction of Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He said horrible things about President Trump and all of his supporters, by the way. How could we say he did not have political bias?
Yeah, I know that it clearly reflects a personal bias that he had. I'll leave it to others and the facts that are set out.
There you go. Once again, you're looking at the personal bias of those handling the investigation. Just be clear. Adam Schiff was talking to these people. He's the one, but he was the mouthpiece. He was the official mouthpiece of this whole hoax. And he used his special position as being either the ranking member or the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, which gets an enormous amount of information that is privileged, that other House members don't get to see. So when he goes in front of a Jake Tapper, goes in front of the national audience and says, trust me, there was collusion, bottom line is he flat out lied and he got censored. Thank goodness for that. Let's take a look. One last thing here, just for fun. When you look at the actual Durham report, because he does, I think, drill down on this really even more directly. And I think I want to equip you with the knowledge and the ability to reference stuff so you can look it up for yourself. Don't take our word for it. We're trying to show you the pathway to be able to look stuff up for yourself so you can tell people about this and you can inform people who otherwise don't know. But you look at the actual Durham report. This is the report right here. Now it's a lot of pages, so we went, and if you look at dailytorch.com, you'll see an article on it called Durham Exposed the Deep State. It was done a couple of days ago. And I'm just going to read a couple of quotes. It seems, quote unquote, it seems highly likely that at a minimum, confirmation bias played a significant role in the FBI's acceptance of extraordinary, serious allegations derived from uncorroborated information that had not been subjected to the typical exacting analysis employed by the FBI and other members of the intelligence community. In short, is the office's assessment that the FBI discounted or willfully ignored material information that did not support the narrative of a collusive relationship between Trump and Russia. Similarly, the FBI Inspection Division report says that the investigators repeatedly ignored or explained away evidence contrary to the theory the Trump campaign had conspired with Russia. It appeared that there was a pattern of assuming nefarious intent. An honest and objective and honest assessment of these strands of information should have caused the FBI to question not only the predication for Crossfire Hurricane, but also to reflect on whether the FBI was being manipulated for political purposes or political or other purposes. Unfortunately, it did not. What an indictment! What a just stark indictment of the FBI, of the entire process that was gone through, and it was all fueled initially by the Clinton campaign. The Clinton campaign creating a Russia collusion through the Democratic National Committee and running a whole operation through Crossfire Hurricane, called Crossfire Hurricane, but used a whole variety of different sources, CrowdStrike, a whole series of different validators, which were all circular validators, taking the same bit of information and validating it in 3 different ways, but because they heard it from the same person. It was a fraud perpetrated on the American public. And Adam Schiff, as the lead Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, was the face and was the voice and was the major validator to the media that all of this garbage was true. And that's why when the House Republicans said, you no longer have good standing in this House, and they censured him yesterday, they were 100% right. 100% right. You cannot abuse your office and abuse the American public and the trust of the American public by telling flat out lies and expect to be held in high honor. Now, we knew that Speaker McCarthy stood up and said, no, Nancy Pelosi, no, Hakeem Jeffries, who's now the minority leader, you cannot put Schiff back on the House Intel Committee. He has lost the trust of the House. So they'd already removed him from House Intel, and Nancy Pelosi Jeffries put him on the House Judiciary Committee. And hence, that's why he shows up in this hearing yesterday. But the step that Representative Luna took it a step further. She said, not only are you denied the ability to be on House Intelligence Committee because you're not trusted, but you're denied a position of good standing in this House of Representatives altogether. And good on her. Finally, somebody is held accountable for the garbage we've been put through and the attempt to destroy and undermine a duly elected president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. I'm going to read some comments now and see what people are saying here. This really is, we always talk about the frustration that we don't, nobody's ever held accountable. And while it may seem like a small thing, in Washington, D.C., this is a big thing. And that's and so it's really important that this happened. Let's see here. Michael Siski. Hey, Mike, thanks for hanging in. It wasn't a hoax. It was the worst domestic attack towards a sitting president in history of America, treason. Yeah, I think Michael, you make a great point. The collusion lie was a hoax, but the effort was to undermine the president of the United States. And quite honestly, the whole Mueller investigation, they knew the underlying predicate for their investigation was false from day one. Peter Strzok said so. He said that he wasn't sure he wanted to become part of the Mueller team because he didn't think the Steele dossier was reliable at all. And so we know that because of his old text messages with his paramour. He did go over there. So, but you have to understand that the guy who was leading this at the FBI knew that the whole thing was garbage. And the entirety of the Mueller campaign and the whole Mueller effort was to try to entrap President Trump and those around him and create an obstruction of justice charge and the like. The way we know that, and we know it because of everything they did, but secondly, it's one of the things that the left has figured out, and they figured it out from way back in Nixon, because they always talk about it wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up. Well, in today's world, the cover-up is obstruction of justice. And obstruction of justice is defined as, we don't like the answer you gave us, and consequently, we're charging with obstruction of justice. So this entire thing was designed to try to take down Donald Trump on an obstruction of justice charge and take down those around him and impoverish those around him. So in the future, he'd have a very hard time finding people to work with him, because the cost of working with him exceeded any potential value of things you could do for the country. Were you willing? And that's what they've done. They basically said, Donald Trump, we don't care if you were elected. We're never going to allow you to have the power of the presidency. The other thing that happened off of this, Michael, and I think we can't be lost, is because of all this, you know what Donald Trump couldn't do? He couldn't actually go and talk to Putin and try to figure out some problems. He couldn't actually deal with the problems in the world, because he was constantly under suspicion and constantly under attack. And so the one place that, right now we're at war with Putin through a proxy war, but at war with Putin. And the one place where Donald Trump was not allowed to intervene was in Russia-Ukraine relationships, because after all, he'd been tarred with being a Russian agent. And so it was impossible for him to actually act as U.S. president in a theater that, as we know now, extremely dangerous. So yeah, it's a treason. Yeah, I think it was treason. What's more, we're sitting on the precipice of a direct fight where our troops are on the ground fighting against Russian troops in Ukraine, and we're sitting there on the precipice of nuclear exchanges, and some of it is directly because of Adam Schiff and his lie that he continued to tell the American public, and the Hillary Clinton effort to tar Donald Trump as being unsuitable and being a Russian agent. And it just, it's just unimaginable the amount of damage that these people did to our country. Let's see here. Let's just see what we have. Sean Burke. It's beyond clear that the Republican Party as a whole cannot be trusted with power. The Cold War never ended, but merely moved into the battlefield. Several actually Republican consultants have been duped into being proxy voters. What the heck? I'm so glad I brought this one up, Sean. Apparently, you haven't been paying attention to anything that's been going on. I would suggest you turn off MSNBC and actually turn on a real news network and actually do some independent research, because the fact of the matter is, when you look at this, Donald Trump is the guy who was actually trying to keep us from being in the endless wars. That's what he was doing. That's why he got targeted. So, Sean, I appreciate your comment, but might be wise to get off of MSNBC for a moment or two and find some facts out. Let's see here. He lied to Congress about another country having weapons of mass destruction. The result of millions of people's lives were lost on both sides. Who's the head of the intelligence agency back then? Maybe two. Okay. I'm apparently missing some part of this conversation. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk about Missy Robinson. We haven't actually seen actual arrest of Hunter Biden, whose ties with China and the crack pipe. No, Missy, the Hunter Biden slap on the wrist was, we're going to give you 2 misdemeanors and call it a day for tax evasion from 2017 and 2018. And we're going to basically call everything and just say, oh, nothing else counts. That's what the U.S. attorney out of Delaware decided to do. U.S. attorney who was signed off on by Biden's successor in the Senate from Delaware, and one of his close personal friends who became a senator from Delaware. So they signed off on a U.S. attorney, and that U.S. attorney is basically said none of the above matters. And let's just be clear. We talked about this yesterday, but I've got to reiterate it because some people might not have been on. One of the things we have was from the fraudulent wrist slap kind of cover up by the U.S. attorney in Delaware is what we actually ended up with is they ignored the activity in 2016, 2015, 2014 that we know of, the activity that we know of. They ignored the 13 banks that money was run through from foreign countries, ranging from China to Romania to Ukraine to Russian oligarch and more. Ignored those things. They ignored the 20 plus shell corporations that the money was run through to hide its origin. And because they ignored 2014, 2015, 2016, they ignored the direct quid pro quo connection to the big guy who was getting a piece of the action. So they deliberately covered up and said, "Oh, we've done it. We've done our part." And in doing so, they're trying to smokescreen the piece of this that directly points to Joe Biden using his office in the vice presidency to benefit foreign interests in exchange for money. And the reason, and how you need to, this isn't just a made up charge. This isn't Adam Schiff here. Here's what we do know. We know that Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, a week after they got the payment from the Ukraine, the week after that occurred, the head of Burisma, the natural gas company that made the payment, showed up on the White House visitor log because he went to the one of the vice president's Christmas receptions. And so he showed up at a Christmas reception that is very difficult to get into. And Hunter Biden was there and brought him to the Christmas reception. So there was a direct, they got paid, and suddenly the guy finds himself in the White House rubbing elbows with the vice president. This isn't a contested fact. This is the records. So, but none of that gets talked about because that was all that's smoke screened away. And which is why the House impeachment investigation has to move forward vigorously, because that's the exact kind of thing that's the most dangerous thing is this. It's not just that the guy's a creep and taking money. It's was he giving away for the money? What was he selling? And that's where we have to get to. We know he was selling access. The question is, what else was he selling? And quite honestly, is he still selling it? And given the Chinese money connections and his response to the satellite balloon, I think that's a reasonable question that Congress needs to find out, because it's dangerous to have somebody who's a controlled asset from a foreign power sitting in the White House. Let's go and see where we are at. Let's see. Shifty for brains is a treasonous Democratic lying progressive Congress needs to be put behind bars. Well, the one thing is true is he's got to go back. He's running for Senate in California, and he faces it's going to be a difficult race for him. So he is running for Senate in California, and let's hope that the Democrats in California, they've got a primary system where the top two vote getters go from the primary to the general, regardless of political party. So let's hope that the Democrats are wise enough to not vote in mass for Schiff, and that the Republicans are wise enough to consolidate around a single candidate, so they get a candidate into the general election and knock Schiff off, because that's the desirable outcome, is to put him out of politics. And the voters of California are going to have that say. Right now, he represents Glendale, California, which an area that used to be a Republican district, a very conservative Republican district, that in the past 30 years has shifted quite a bit. So anyway, that's the politics of it. The House has done what they're going to do by censuring him. They've effectively put as big of a black mark on their record that they can do without expulsion. And it's given the fight there was to censure him amongst the Republicans, I think that's as far as the House Republicans would be willing to go. Let's see here what else we have. You guys don't like Schiff very much. Sorry I played him so long. It's kind of fun seeing the comments. I'm going to go. The next step is to go after Heidi Smithson. Thank you. The next step is to go after the rest: Hillary Clinton, Obama, Biden, Schiff, and other corrupt people. You know, I think we face an interesting time here because we know. I think right now we have a pretty good idea of what happened, and but the challenge is, do we end up having a situation where the American public rejects going after the whole litany of evildoers as being not little more than what the press will say, little more than revenge for their going after Donald Trump? For me, I look at it and I say the issue at hand is Joe Biden there's a lot of evidence and the appearance of being involved in a criminal conspiracy and selling access and other things as vice president and then as president. That seems to be that, and he's the one who has the power right now. And ultimately, we have to go and take the immediate problem at hand, and that's Biden, and focus on what he's been doing and the evidence is mounting against him, and create a willingness on the House Republican side to impeach him. And I think we need to focus on that as opposed to getting off and fighting Hillary Clinton again or Obama, even though I think Obama's worthwhile. Hillary Clinton's certainly worthwhile. She should have been, dealt with a long time ago in terms of legally. She's like a cat with 9 lives. But right now, Biden is the guy who's holding the power. He's got his finger on the button, and he's dangerous from a standpoint of our national security because he happens to be president. He's sitting in the Oval Office, and so Americans for Limited Government has a contact Congress urging them to impeach Biden. Go to getliberty.org. Getliberty.org and to check it out. It's very simple, and we'd encourage you to go ahead and do that. On this video, I would encourage you also to share it. It's really important you share it, and if you feel like it, it'd be helpful if you put some stars up there or something. There's a star thing that I'm not. Listen, I'm a political guy. I'm not a star guy, but the fact is, we're putting a lot of resources into this and to try to provide you the best information, provide you a platform where you can talk, a platform where you can be heard, and a platform where you get informed, quite honestly. And providing support through this using stars is really, really helpful. I'm going to end this with a simple reminder. This still is the greatest country on earth. The stuff we're talking about, it hurts to talk about. It hurts to relive the lies that Adam Schiff told and know in retrospect just how damaging those lies were. But I take heart that a freshman member of the House of Representatives, freshmen don't have any power. A freshman member of the House of Representatives, a woman who's 7 months pregnant, gets up and says, I was elected by the people to hold those people accountable who did harm to our nation. And she stood up, and there was a lot of people who didn't want to do this. She stood up and she said, no, I'm going to do the right thing, and we're going to vote on it. And when they voted on it last week, it didn't pass. And she said, I'm not backing down. We're going to get this done. And Adam Schiff was held accountable, at least at some level, by someone. For all of history, it will be noted that he was censured for his acts of infamy against this country by lying and using his power as a leading member of the House Intelligence Committee to flat out lie to the American public, mislead the American public, and create disharmony beyond anything we could have ever imagined amongst the American public, and effectively undermine a U.S. president leading a coup, being the voice of the coup. And you know what? And thank goodness that Anna Paulina Luna stood up and said, I'm going to do what I told my constituents what to do. I'm going to try to hold these people accountable. It's unsatisfying. You'd like to see the guy in jail, but the fact of the matter is what the House can do, is what they have the votes for. And because of her courage to stand up and fight, not just for this country, but for the future, for her unborn child, to stand up and fight and do what's right, try to hold these swamp monsters accountable. Thank goodness that she and others like her are there in the Congress fighting tooth and nail for truth. So I know that some people are, gee, I'm disappointed it's only a censure, big whoop-de-doo. But this is a big whoop-de-doo in Congress. And, folks, praise her. Give her love. So go on her website and thank her. Let her know that the country appreciates that she stood up. She kept her word. She stood up. She fought to try to hold these people who abuse their power, hold them accountable. Thank goodness for her. And she's another one who's going after the deep state through the abuse of power in terms of censoring people on social media. And she just needs to be lifted up, because what she did may not seem like much on the outside, but on the inside, in the club of 435 members of the House of Representatives, what she did is heroic. So let her know. We certainly will. And with that, I'm going to sign off. I appreciate all of you guys who've hung in there, and we will talk to you. We will talk to you tomorrow.